Welcome to Australian Kadampa Stories, where we get to hear about the spiritual lives of people practicing Kadampa Buddhism here in Australia. I'm your host, Colleen Isaacs, and today I am joined by Kelsang Tara, a resident teacher in Perth. This is especially special for me because Tara and I were Kadampa babies together, weren't we, Tara?
We certainly were, Colleen.
So looking forward to hearing about her journey, which is funny because I was a little bit there for part of it, though obviously I didn't, I'm sure I'll learn a lot about what was happening for Tara at the time. So welcome, Tara. Thanks so
Thank
much
you
for
very
joining.
much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, joining us from Perth. I don't know if it's sunny Perth or windy Perth or rainy Perth.
Yeah, it's pretty sunny, Perth. Yeah,
Pretty sunny
fairly
Perth.
sunny, a little bit windy.
Yeah, nice. Now, of course, you're not from Perth. You have made the big move out west, yeah, to become
Yeah.
resident teacher over there. Um, Tell us about where you're from, Tara.
So I'm from the East Coast originally. So I grew up in Victoria, originally a small town called Beaufort, and then Ballarat, and then moved to Melbourne when I started university. And that's where I first encountered Dharma teachings. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you tell us, Tara, what life was like for you at the time? What was going on? What were you doing? How did you find Kadampa Buddhism?
Yeah, sure. So at the time, I was studying postgrad in uni, and I was in medical research science. And whilst I was really, I think very like passionate about what I was doing, and I was really, eager to be helping and benefiting people. That's why I'd kind of gotten into that profession in the first place, was looking for, what can I do that's going to make an impact and that's going to help, change people's lives for the better. Whilst I was very passionate about what I was doing, it was also really stressful. Like the environment that I was working in was very high pressure. It felt quite um, challenging and certainly very anxiety provoking. And so, whilst I had, in theory, a job that I was really passionate about and really, supportive friends and living in this amazing city, like living in Melbourne and so on, I was really struggling with managing my anxiety, just that process whereby the moment you stop worrying about one thing, you just start worrying about the next and you just start worrying about the next. And I could just see no end to it. And like having, physiological symptoms going with that as well. And thinking, how do I how do I deal with this? And around the same time, my mum was visiting me in Melbourne. She'd like periodically come and we'd stay overnight in the city and we'd kind of have a bit of a girls' night, go out for dinner and just talk and maybe go to like an art gallery or something like this. We'd have a bit of an evening together. And I was sort of extolling all of my anxieties to my poor mum over dinner. And then the next morning, we were looking for somewhere to go for breakfast, and we walked past the Kadampa Centre in Melbourne, which was on Hardware Lane at the time.
That
Um,
one. That one.
yeah, big
Yes.
glass windows. It turns out it had just opened in the sort of previous few months. And I was busy like looking for this cafe that I wanted to take my mum to. I was like looking off in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, she's spotted the centre and spotted these overcoming anxiety leaflets in the little leaflet box outside there. And she's picked it up and like put it in front of my face and said, maybe you should go to this.
So was your mom.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got my mum to thank for finding these teachings. So I went along. I wasn't like I didn't book in straight away, but I hung on to that leaflet and sort of thought, yeah, like
Common
maybe
story, isn't it, Tara? The
it's
leaflet like is at home for a while on the fridge or coffee table or in the hallway.
so true. Actually, we had someone come last year sometime. We had someone come to Perth and they'd had a leaflet in their drawer for about like 13 years or something. So it's entirely common story. But I ended up booking into it, and yeah, that's kind of where it all begun. I found the teaching so practical and enjoyable, and it was yeah, I just that the people were so welcoming, and I thought, yeah, this is gonna help me solve my problem.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So that was
Now,
my
you
first
very
experience.
humbly said you were studying postgrad. Yeah. You were
Yeah,
doing your PhD.
yes, correct.
Okay. Let's come clean, Tara, because, you're a brainiac of a girl. Yeah.
No, for better or worse. Yeah,
It's
no,
funny,
I did
mind
have a
you.
very wonderful, yeah, opportunity to be studying where I was, and I continue to be grateful for that. Whilst seemingly now I've kind of thrown it all in, hugely grateful for the opportunities that I was given. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'd love to ask, and I'm not quite sure how to frame this question, so go with it. But I'd love to
Hmm.
ask about the shift from, kind of like the scientific, and I'm tempted to use air quotes because it's hard even to define that, but kind
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
scientific, modern scientific way of understanding and looking at things, and then
yeah, yeah.
fully embracing Buddhism, which of course is a very different kind of science. Yeah, just
Yes,
as scientific, but different.
in a different way. Yeah, so
Yeah,
true.
so tell me about that shift. What was that like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to talk about because, as you say, yeah, we're all quite familiar with contemporary modern science, and whether you work in it or not, you have a sense of, it's based on logic and observation, and it's viewed as being, many people have a lot of faith in science and its reliability and so on. Whereas with Buddhism, as you say, it's a very different kind of science, even though it is very scientific in its approaches. And of course, Buddha's described as being like a scientist of the mind. So I think for me, that initial similarity was very helpful. I think I probably really needed that because being somebody who's very sort of like logical and linear and coming from a scientific background, finding and not really having any experience with sort of religion or faith or and I wasn't particularly open to those things either. I was a little bit dismissive, I think, very sort of atheist, I suppose. But the similarities in that Buddhism was all about testing the teachings in your own experience to see if they work for you and following logical reasoning and so on. I think that I definitely needed that initially to help kind of get me interested. It's one of the first things I remember really liking about Buddhism is that you weren't forced to believe anything or told to have faith in something. It's just these teachings were presented to you and you tested in your own experience to see that they worked for you and helped you to feel more peaceful. Um, so, yeah, so that helped me initially. And then I think over time, what I found and what I guess led me on the path that I ended up following is that personally, I felt that Buddhism could explain things that eluded scientific explanation.
Mm,
And that's what I really connected with and resonated with is there's things that kind of can't be explained in by science, different experiences and why particular people become sick and unwell and why others enjoy good health. And I was working in drug discovery, so it's like why certain medicines work for some people and certain ones don't, and the power of your attitude of mind to influence the therapeutic effect of things and so on. I personally found that over time Buddhism was answering a lot of questions, both from my profession but also just life questions like what is the meaning of life and how do we really benefit others and why do things happen the way they happen. And so that's what really drew me deeper to wanting to kind of study in more depth and wanting to teach and wanting to help because it was starting to occur to me that for me this was the way that I was meant to really help people for me personally. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so speaking of wanting to help and wanting to teach, my recollection, and you can, correct me, you finished your PhD and basically then you moved up to the temple. I mean,
I
it took maybe
did.
with a little bit more time in between, but remember it being fairly quick. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you weren't Tara at the time, of course, but you
Yeah.
finished it. I remember actually seeing this tome. Yeah.
That's right. I brought it in. Yeah, I brought it into the center. Yeah, no, I submitted my thesis one day, and then the next day I was offered the opportunity to move to KMCA
Amazing.
and to be a full-time volunteer, which had been my wish. So I thought, well, not many PhD students get a job the day after they submit.
That's wonderful. My sister-in-law, when she finished her PhD, it took her months of pounding the pavement to find a job.
Yeah.
And so you got one the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. Just in a bit of a
Moving
different
forward.
field.
Oh, that's amazing. So obviously you must have known fairly quickly that this was your path, or at least something that you wanted to really get to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, after the first thing that I came to, I knew I loved it, and I knew it was effective because it just really, the methods that were being talked about and learning to control and transform the mind, it really spoke to my experience and it made a lot of sense. But it kind of took me until when I first went to KMC Australia, the National Centre, to the Australian Festival. That's what really I think changed me from being sort of an attendee, like, oh, this is something I go to being, this is something I'm part of and something I want to, yeah, something I want to be a part of. Like, that kind of feeling of like I've found my people, and I've kind of found my passion, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Those events are incredible, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Just, yeah, life changing on many levels, and just to connect with a community and to see the effect of multiple people all together putting Dharma into practice, receiving teachings and meditating together and laughing together and having coffee together and all the rest of it. It's just, yeah, really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you spoke a little bit about this, but can I ask you if you had a favorite practice at the beginning or certain teachings that really resonated that were like opening a door for you?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think the one I guess I'll share is something that I can remember practicing really early on. So I was still working, I was still studying my PhD, and one of the things I was struggling with in my work environment was a particular person that I was working with, who I just found it really, really difficult to kind of get along with. I found they had quite a sort of angry, quite sort of volatile personality, and it was a bit like you were walking on eggshells around this person, and you really didn't want to be on the receiving end of their sort of judgment or their anger. And so I remember a lot of my struggles were around feeling tense and uptight about this particular person. Like, I'd even chart different ways of moving around the floor of the building I worked on so I didn't have to walk past them, because I just felt so quite, anxious and uptight about seeing them, or and so on. And I must have heard sometime around then the teaching on separating people from their delusions. So the teachings on, like, that analogy of the salt water, and the water's like our pure mind, and the salt is kind of like our faults and our delusions and so on. And rather than seeing the person and the delusions as one, you separate them and then blame all of their faults and bad behavior, harmful behavior on their delusions, and see them more as a person who is like afflicted by the inner sickness of anger, and so on, as you would see someone afflicted by disease. And in that way, you can have compassion for them, like genuine compassion, not pity, but a genuine sense that you're suffering, and um, and you wouldn't be harmful in this way if you weren't, like, if there wasn't a lot going on for you that's really disturbing your mind. And I remember going back into work, the I must have just received that teaching, and I saw them, and my heart just filled with compassion, like straight away. And I just felt I felt so peaceful and so calm. And I genuinely just saw this person as, you know what, you're suffering and struggling, just like me, just like everybody else in this challenging world. And it just dissolved everything away. There was no more fear, there was no more anxiety. And so that, like that, the power of that really stayed with me. I think that was one of those pivotal moments where you just go, you know, Dharma really works, Buddha's teachings really work. Um, so that's really stayed with me, that teaching in itself, but also the idea that you can um, that you can transform adversity, that no matter what you're experiencing, there's always a way of developing some inner wealth from it. Like you can gather inner wealth even in a very adverse circumstance. That's, yeah, probably still one of my favorite teachings to this day, is just the idea of what inner wealth can be gained from this experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so, what was the experience of going to work like after you'd done this experiment in your mind with respect
It
to
was
this
just
person?
completely different. It really transformed immediately. You know, I felt at ease, you know, I felt relaxed. I think that that teaching on viewing everything as an opportunity to cultivate positive qualities of mind really helps you to feel at ease in an increasing variety of situations, because you start to feel in your heart, well, there's nothing to fear, because, you know, in this setting, I can develop patience, or I can develop compassion. And so I felt so protected, I think, which is what like Dharma teachings are about. It's about protecting your mind from pain and suffering. And so I felt very protected and consequently just very at ease. And I stopped fearing what I'd been fearing before. Yeah. So it was much more enjoyable.
Well, isn't that wonderful? Because how many people would love to feel, like to use your words, at ease and relaxed at work?
Oh, everyone.
Everyone.
Everyone, absolutely. Yeah. And that is such a teaching to enable that to happen. Because, you know, let's face it, we're faced with so many adversities and challenges, and there's so much uncertainty and so much that you can't control. So, yeah, that protection's got to come from, yeah, inside.
Yeah, but it was, as you say, an inside change that you made. Yeah,
That's
unlike
it. That's all that was different.
that's all
Yeah,
that was needed. Yeah. And
exactly.
yet so many of us spend so much time, changing jobs, moving to a different part of the floor, avoiding that part of the floor, right? Changing your schedule.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. For me to be protected from pain, a change of mind was all that was needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you were being a scientist, yeah, using your own mind as a laboratory.
Mm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and see
Absolutely.
what you learned. And so can we not I want to completely fast forward, but so you moved to the Temple KMCA Australia,
Mm.
took on the job. You were looking after the kitchen, am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was my first job. Yeah. In the kitchen, and Tarpa, the publications company as well.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
hmm
And so when did you start teaching? What was that like for you? How did that happen?
I started teaching, it was probably about a year after I started coming along. Um, and I remember earlier that year attending a particular teaching, and just the wish kind of came in the mind, like, oh, you know, maybe that's something I could do one day, is teach, maybe that's possible. And I'm thinking, you know, down the
In
track.
15 years.
I was still really new, you know, exactly. I was still really new. So when I was offered the opportunity, maybe about 4 or 5 months after that time, after that initial wish, I was so ready to say yes, because I just really wanted to. I just knew I really wanted to. So, yeah, so I feel very fortunate to have been given that opportunity. And then, yeah, did a couple of kind of simply meditate classes to start getting a bit of a feel for it. And then, yeah, had an opportunity to teach one of the branch classes for a series,
Hmm.
like 4 or 5 weeks in a row to get some experience of that. And then when I moved to KMCA, which was really at the start of the following year, I started teaching a couple of branch classes each week. So yeah, very, very soon kind of built up the flying hours, I suppose, so to speak. I mean, I was super new, I was only just really getting acquainted with everything that was in the books. But I loved the Dharma so much. So I guess that's why I was given the opportunity, because if you love it, you
Hmm.
then want to practice and you want to share it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
it's great.
wonderful. I remember going to, I don't know if it was among your first day courses. I think it might have been, I was looking back at my notes just to
Yeah,
prepare for this. It might have been the art of acceptance. So I don't know how early
yeah,
that was. And I
it
remember thinking,
was.
oh my gosh, because we joined the foundation program together.
We
I
did. We
remember we
led
did group
discussion
discussion for the
together.
first time together. No one knows had a clue what was going on.
Oh no, you were fantastic. I remember sitting there as an utter newbie and I'm looking over at you and I remember just thinking, she's so cool, like cool as a cucumber, totally knows what she's on about. And I've got my cue cards and I'm shaking.
We both had our cue cards. I don't know why I remember this. The topic was the Four Noble Truths.
Mm,
Thing.
yeah.
But so I guess what I'm trying to say is between both of us, like not having a clue really what was going on. Funny that we were chosen to do discussion together because I think like we were both brand new, right? Like neither of us had maybe even seen a group discussion. I can't remember. And
Yeah.
then not that much longer, like they're, teaching a day course. So, that's an amazing jump. Amazing. Yeah. So what you talked about your love for Dharma. What else kind of like propelled you or gave you the, I don't know, like the belief, the words are failing me. Tell me, Tara.
Yes.
What got you there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it'd be remiss of me to not say that my first teacher was Gandorning and he gave me many, many wonderful opportunities. So, but part of it was certainly just being given the opportunity and just really wanting to say yes to all of them. But I think I think what helps to overcome, because as you say, it is like a big thing. And, the day courses in Melbourne at the time, there was just so many people coming, and the art of acceptance is a very popular topic. So you kind of know, like, okay, this is going to be a massive room full of people. And there's this part of you that there's something to overcome within in order to do that. But I think it's when you've practiced the teachings that you've heard and you just know how effective they are, and you know that even just one word can change people's life, like even just saying the real source of happiness is inner peace is utterly life changing
Mhm.
for people if you really think about it, even something as simple as that. So I think that's certainly what has always driven me, is just that sense of this is so beneficial and it's so clear and practical, and all people need is just for it to be kind of brought to light for them. And that's how I felt in my first day course. Was I felt like I was being told things that were just almost being drawn out of my heart, like sort of things I'd always known, but you just needed someone to kind of say it out loud, and you're like, yes, yes, of course. So just wanting to give that to others, I think, is what has really helped and continues to help every
Yeah.
day now.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the lightness that you have about you. Yeah, when it comes to approaching teaching or talking about teaching, it's really like refreshing and lovely. So tell us about how you went from, where you were to now being a resident teacher, moved to a very different part of the country.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult to be further away from where I was. I'm a stone's throw from the ocean where I am, off the west coast, so it's literally impossible to be further away. Yeah, I was offered the opportunity to come here in 2018 to be the education program coordinator, so
Was
to
it
be
that
one of
long
the
ago?
centre
2018. Wow.
managers. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was offered that opportunity and I said yes, of course. And so spent about a year and a half or so, a little bit over a year and a half here in that role, also teaching branches and so on, and just yeah, continuing to learn. And then in 2020, I went to our mother centre, Manjushri Kadampa Meditation Centre, to do a 6 month teacher training program there with Genla Kenrab, one of our senior teachers, which was just such a precious, extraordinary opportunity to learn directly from somebody with, whatever it is, 35, 40 years experience, and to study a book like Joyful Path of Good Fortune systematically and very quickly, express style with Genla Kenrab. And then following that, I was actually appointed as resident teacher of KMC Auckland in New Zealand initially. But at this time, COVID was like, we were in that stage where we realized that this wasn't just going to be a quick thing that'd be over in a few months. It was very quickly changing the entire world, and I couldn't get to New Zealand. It was impossible for me to get there. So I was kind of the teacher remotely for a few months. Um,
Okay.
but then was eventually appointed to be resident teacher in Perth. And so it'll be 4 years in December.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. So
Mm.
what an amazing job you have, and how um
It's amazing.
but also just how different to, the how you were spending your time when I first met you, when you first joined.
Hugely different, absolutely. It really, being a resident teacher is um, it's a real honor in reality to fit for your main job to be studying Dharma, practicing Dharma, and sharing Dharma. Um, of course, all of us, whatever our profession, can be trying to practice Dharma in whatever context we're in. But yeah, I feel tremendous good fortune to be doing the job that I'm doing. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. What would you say to somebody who is maybe they have a leaflet on their fridge or in a drawer? Yeah, so they've developed an interest, but
Yeah.
they haven't like actually gotten to a class yet. They're still not sure. What would you say to somebody who is interested, but
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of got to go for it, don't you? I mean, I would say what it's like to come. What's going to happen is you're going to arrive and you'll be greeted by someone friendly, and you can just say hi. You can have a big, extensive chat with them if you want, or you can just say hi and then go sit in the meditation room. So if you're kind of reserved and you just sort of want to keep to yourself, you can do that. If you're looking for someone to have a big chin wag with, you can do that too. And then, in the class, you'll learn 2 meditations, you'll receive a teaching. There's a short prayer called Liberating Prayer, which is really beautiful, acknowledging that the teachings come from Buddha. There's bound to be something in the class that you'll connect with and that you'll find practical. There's for sure, whatever the topic is, don't wait for a topic to come around that you think you need. Just go to something. Like, don't think too hard about it. Just go to something. Whatever's next, just go. And for sure, you'll walk away with something that you feel is really valuable and really practical. You can just drop in, you don't have to commit to anything. So, there's nothing to lose by giving it a go and so much to gain. So, you know, go for it.
I like that. There's bound to be one thing at least
For
that you'll
sure.
connect with that will be beneficial.
That's it. Absolutely. Guaranteed.
Quite possibly more than one thing, but there's bound
Quite,
to be one.
quite possibly more than one thing. Absolutely.
Oh, Tara, I love this conversation. It's been such a pleasure, obviously getting to know you in the early days, but then also seeing, your spiritual life develop now from a distance, of course, given how far away you are, since Perth is so far away. But it's been such a pleasure to just to to observe that, be inspired by that. So thank you, Tara, for for being Kelsang Tara, and for chatting today as well, of course.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you for being Colleen. You're equally inspiring. I've certainly appreciated kind of sharing that spiritual journey alongside you so far. So, yeah, and thanks very much for the invitation to chat today. It's been great.
Okay, well, thanks again, Tara. Lots of love. See you
Lots of
soon.
love to you too. Yeah, look forward to seeing you soon. Bye, Colleen.